Dr. LeBaron, we were just discussing, you mentioned how the research is going to expand into different concentrations and dosing protocols. I am often asked for my protocol and what I recommend to various people of various different populations. And my response is always, I don't think we have enough data here. And that even if we had the data, that there's no singular response I believe we could give to all people all the time. Now, hydrogen has a vastly higher safety profile than even something like exercise. We have not determined any harm, even at very, very high doses. However, we know with hormonic agents such as hydrogen, such as exercise, cold, heat, that there is massive differences in individual response, even within an individual on different days. We're certainly not going to tell a 90-year-old grandma to load 5 plates on each side and hammer back squats to get stronger. And I don't think we're going to be telling people in the future that everyone should do the same amount of hydrogen, same concentration, same frequency all the time. However, this is an area where you vastly exceed me in expertise and knowledge. So I want to defer to you to know what your thoughts are, what you tell people.
Well, it is a good question because the number one question we get from the general public and clinicians is, what is the optimal concentration? What is the optimal duration? I have this condition. I want to use it for such and such. I have these patients. How do I use it? And frankly, we don't really know the optimal. But what I can tell you, and actually what we teach in the Molecular Hydrogen Institute courses, which again is independent and separate from InhaleH2, but this is really good information that I would encourage anyone to go take these educational courses if they want to know more. There's a few principles. Number one, when you inhale hydrogen gas, it just goes into the lungs and diffuses into the blood. And it takes around 20 to 30 minutes or so to reach equilibrium. And that means, I would say, you want to do a minimum session of 20 to 30 minutes so that you reach an equilibrium, because in order to get therapeutic effects, the concentration of hydrogen gas has to reach a therapeutic threshold. And based upon Henry's law, when you have 1% hydrogen gas, you dissolve several micromolar hydrogen gas concentration in the blood. And that's enough, shown in clinical studies, in cell culture, well, and clinical, but cell culture studies, to induce a therapeutic effect, and clinical studies also. So I would say 20, 30 minutes at a minimum. Now, the next principles that we can say is, what is being done right now in the clinical studies? What is the concentration being used, and how long are those sessions? Typically, the optimal concentration, in my opinion, is going to be between 2 to 4%. Now, this is important because sometimes a 2% concentration might be more effective than a 4%. In fact, we saw trends even with the Nature Medicine publication that came out in 2007. They tested 1%, 2%, and 4%, and they found that 2% was more effective than 1%, but also tended to be more effective than 4%. And several other studies found the same thing. So this is, say, a neurological condition. And now it's possible with something, a different condition, a higher concentration could be more effective. Now, we don't quite know yet, but typically this range is around 2 to 4%, which is really fortuitous. It's interesting because above 4% is also flammable. So it's perfect. We can give you a 2 to 4% concentration that seems to be ideal, optimal for most situations, and it's not going to be flammable. In terms of the duration, again, 20, 30 minutes in terms of basic pharmacokinetics. The studies, they can go as long as 18 hours. For example, the study with a post-cardiac arrest syndrome, they inhaled precisely 2% hydrogen gas, mixed tanks, given into the ventilator, face mask. So what we're trying to mimic with this, right? But they inhaled hydrogen gas for 18 hours a day. So it's a little bit different, but there wasn't a comparison group. They didn't compare, well, what about 2 hours and 4 and 6 and 8? Ultimately, I hope that research will be done, and I think maybe like with a machine like this, it can be done. It's more feasible, right? Maybe 6 hours or 4 hours would have been just as, or potentially even more effective, because if hydrogen, as we published, has this hormetic-like effect, then maybe you don't need that long, and maybe intermittent exposures, maybe several times a day could be more effective. So we actually need to do more research in order to do that type of make those types of recommendations in those protocols. Well, it's difficult to just throw hundreds of thousands, literally millions of dollars to just do that type of research. We don't have, it's not easy to get government grants and funding to do that type of research. So when we do the research, we want to organize something and get a protocol that's the best that we can. And so we want to actually start looking for trends in the data. And so it's really exciting because we have so many clinicians and doctors, physicians and wellness clinics and all these people who really are excited about using this machine. And they can actually try it, where you can actually say, okay, I have these patients, let's all do 2%. These ones I'm going to do 4%. I'm going to have this one do 1 hour a day. This is going to be 1 hour 3 times a day. This is going to be, sleeping with it all night. This is going to, all these things. And then we can actually collect this data, this observational empirical data, to start looking for trends so we can drive more research. So I'm actually going to defer to you as the user, the audience, so we can collect that information and just try to find trends in the data. And we're actually developing an app where we can collect this data. Maybe you could, Alex, if you want to share some more on that.
And I want to touch base on two concepts from what you were talking, then I want to talk about this app a little bit more that we decided to develop and we think is critically important. So first off, when we are looking at, say, an intervention of therapeutic, we will look at the minimum viable dosage to exert a physiological effect, and then we'll look at the maximal dosage for peak response. And those are based on population averages. So it's going to vary from person to person. And then when you go beyond that, typically side effects become too great or toxicity becomes too great in drugs, so you get diminishing returns. Or in lifestyle interventions, hormetic interventions such as exercise, they all work on a J curve or a reverse J curve. And we know from population level data that, say, exercising an hour a day a few times a week is roughly as effective for health as exercising several hours a day, every day. So with exercise, when you get a little bit, you improve your health, and then there's a long plateau, and then you have to exercise a tremendous amount until it becomes unhealthy. We know with hydrogen, the plateau seems to be even longer. However, that doesn't mean that more is better. We could reach this peak effect faster. Maybe for most people, most of the time, it's an hour. Maybe it's 2 hours. Maybe the 18 hours a day was still safe and not harmful. It hadn't started dropping into a harm, but it was unnecessary. This is a data we need. And this is one of the reasons why we are developing this app, because we're going to be tracking data from thousands, eventually tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users over time to see where the trends are at concentration, duration. Then from there, we can design well-structured clinical trials to narrow this down. And in time, we can use all of this data, especially for something like a hormetic agent like molecular hydrogen. And I believe AI within the next 5 years, 10 years, will be able to integrate with wearable technology like Oura Rings, and it can measure someone's stress load in the moment and recommend a protocol for them on that day. Now, I'm not the same person today that I was yesterday, and I won't be the same person tomorrow. This is why one day you might crush a workout, and the next day you just can't do it. And then maybe 2 weeks later, that exercise that killed you feels like it wasn't even exercise, because we're constantly changing based on our state around us. And I believe we need this data for individualized responses each day. And it's something we want to work towards. It's not something we're going to give you tomorrow, but I believe we're going to be there in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, honestly, I'm really excited about this. This is again a reason why it's not only excitement, it's like my honor to be to do this, because we can literally get these machines into your hands, so many clinicians, and we're talking about a lot of research interventions. So for example, people who get a machine, if they can sign up to be part of a clinical study, and we have so many different modalities of, like, getting from doing blood testing, from doing exams online, doing these authenticated surveys for before and after, and you'll be able to use a precise protocol. We'll say, okay, we want you to use 2% hydrogen gas, and you're going to use it for an hour every day, and we'll do a study with all of our users, and then we'll be able to start collecting all of this data. I really think we can find so much information out. That's why it's another reason I want many people to use this, to give us your feedback. And this way we can answer these questions, because again, if hydrogen really does have the power to radically revolutionize medical care, then we want to do that. And how can we do that unless we have the data, your data? We can design the clinical trials, we can move and progress forward together with your help.
And I want to chime in a little bit here and address the skeptics that are going to be in the audience on a couple of points. Now, first off, one of the reasons our app isn't out yet, there's a lot of complexity that we're building into this and into the machine and the firmware. So we're not just going to be collecting data on believers. We are building in the ability to, in a back end, control in these clinical trials that people will be doing, the hydrogen concentration so they don't know, and set it to 0 for placebo controls. So this is something we're building right in to be able to develop properly designed clinical trials. In addition, one of the reasons that with the hydrogen water tablets, why I've kept my company private, I've turned down at least 100 venture capitalists over the years, is I want complete control over ethics, integrity, morality in my company, which you cannot actually legally do if you have a fiduciary duty to shareholders. It's something called shareholder primacy. Now, when people criticize corruption in research, it is well-founded, because if a study is industry funded, typically industry owns that data. If the trial doesn't work, if it finds side effects, they can bury the results. It never gets seen. They could run a trial 10 times. Maybe it only works once, so the therapy doesn't work, and now they publish it. I mean, a drug can maybe only work in 15% of people, and now they narrow down the research until they find that population and publish it, and then all of a sudden it gets broad usage. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in obfuscating truth. I believe in a path towards truth. And one of the things I did, because we are all corruptible, and I know that I am corruptible if I'm in charge and own data and my income, my house is on the line, I know I'm going to make a bad decision, for my own benefit. It's the will to power. We all follow it. So one of the things I found important, which is why I've built so many relationships with academics like Dr. LeBaron and researchers all around the world, is I support research. I donate funds, I donate product, I donate placebo, but I don't ever own the data. And I tell every research team, publish whether it works or it doesn't. Publish if it causes harm, because we need to know. And I don't want to sell something that doesn't work or causes harm.
Yeah, which is again something that I really appreciate from Alex, and something that makes me feel comfortable, because the research, the academia, finding the truth matters the most to me. I really am a curious individual. I want to know. And in science, the way to get to the truth is you find out all the things that aren't true. And that allows you to approximate truth, right? Whatever, if you search everything and remove all the impossibilities, whatever remains, regardless of how improbable, is probably what is accurate. And that's really the way science works, and the way that I want to have this work. And I just want to say I really appreciate that perspective, that philosophy that Alex shares. And I also think, if we address the skeptics, is I'm not, for me, I'm not trying to tell anybody, and I want to be clear on this, that you need to buy this machine, that this is going to cure your condition or make you live forever or do all these things. We don't know. That's why it's not FDA approved. It's not actually approved in any government organization. There's misunderstandings about Japanese government approval and things. It's not. The data is not there. If the data and evidence were there, then it would have the approvals. That's how things work. So why do I feel comfortable sort of promoting this machine? Well, I realize that there are individuals, such as myself, who look at the preliminary data and I think, I want to try that, right? We give the hydrogen gas to animals and we see these dramatic effects. We know hydrogen is safe, and I'm right there in the laboratory. I have a video. I'm in the laboratory with a pure tank of hydrogen gas. It's not pure. Actually, this is pure, but I mean it's like medical grade pure, right? And I have this tank of hydrogen gas, and we're administering, we're making hydrogen water and things. And I look at this tank, and I'm like, uh, how do I get this stuff in me? And so it has a regulator on it, but I inhale the hydrogen gas. I want to try. I've done enough research that I believe it's safety, and I want to try. I'm not trying it because I think now it's going to cure every disease and be the fountain of youth. I just believe there are individuals such as myself and others who are trying to be pioneers and want to take control of their own health, and they should be given the informed consent. They should know what hydrogen gas is. That's something that's natural. It's being researched. There's some pretty cool preliminary data and clinical studies on it. They should also know it's not FDA approved. We don't know how long you should use it for, what the concentration is, like all these things. We don't know if it's going to work for you. There's no, we're not promising anything. I don't know. If you have doubts, don't buy the machine. This is not for you. This is a big deal for me, okay? We're not selling you this machine. You can look up the data and you can decide for yourself if it's something that makes sense for you. I got a message the other day from somebody who had cancer, and they're like, I really need to get your machine because I have cancer, and this is going to cure it. I'm like, I'm sorry, I really don't feel comfortable. Actually, I'd rather you not buy this machine because I can't give you that false hope. And I don't mean that it's false, like it's not going to help. There's some pretty cool data on this, but we don't know that. We don't have that. That concerns me. Okay, I'm excited about this because there are individuals who are excited about the research, who want to try it, who have the means necessary to try it, and I believe they, in a free country or a free individual, a free agent, they should have informed consent, and they should be able to make that decision for themselves if they want to try it or not. And I just want to allow people to know this opportunity, and I want to try it if I can, and here I am. I'm gonna try it.
So I want to talk about this point, and I think about this a lot, and what I tell to people. The reason I do things the way I do things is I'm a philosopher first, a scientist second, and a businessman third. But when I was young, I realized that this world runs on finance, it runs on money, and to truly pursue truth, philosophy, science, you need to have your own means, your own tool, your own finance. That is what gives you autonomy to pursue what you want to pursue. Otherwise, you are beholden to an overseer that tells you what you are allowed to pursue as truth in philosophy or science. Now, we have this false dichotomy, this binary position in society, where we have these manipulators, these wolves, these psychopaths that will go and lie to people and say this will cure every condition in the world. And that is extremely immoral. Or for some of them, they're simply idiots. And maybe they're amoral and they're morons and they truly believe it. And I will be blunt with my language in that. However, then we have the skeptics who become morally and financially presumptuous and state that only something that has full approval from an arbitrary set of guidelines written by the government, which is a constantly changing set of rules and regulations, which undergoes a lot of lobbying, that only within this narrow confines is it morally allowable to sell something. And I fundamentally disagree with that because, again, I believe in autonomy. I believe in having the right to informed consent and to choose. And this is why I want to research this. I want to know what the truth is for myself, and I want everyone else to know what is true. But I will not tell you that this is going to cure you of your conditions. We do not have the evidence. We don't have the data. I get emails constantly every day. I get messages on social media every day, people who are desperate and they want to buy something. And I tell them, listen, we don't have the evidence. However, if you would like to read it for yourself, this is preliminary. This is not conclusive. It is being researched on the subject. Share it with your medical doctor, right? It's safe. I don't want to tell you that spending your money is going to solve your problems. But if you are someone like me that has vast amounts of money at this point, and that something like this is a very small investment, if there's even a small chance I want to try it, but I realize that it's not a guarantee, that it's not proven. And I have that informed consent. And I want you to have that informed consent also. I don't want you to be told what you can or cannot do with your money, but I also don't want you to be lied to and told that something is guaranteed to help you.
It's a really big point. Something I appreciate in the alternative health space is the willingness to try new therapies, the willingness to be curious, to investigate new things, to read about new things, the open-mindedness. That's also something I don't like when that is too extreme. Their mind is so open that their brain falls out, right? They need to follow Oberg's dictum, right? Keep an open mind, but not so open that your brain falls out. There's not enough skepticism. And we need to balance this, right? There's pathological skepticism, kind of like Alex referred to, which is let's just deny everything, regardless of the evidence. Let's not even look into it. Let's not even read the paper. And then there's the other side where it's just complete gullibility. Somebody says, oh, this is going to cure your cancer, or, so-and-so tried this and they got better. And that's the evidence. That's all it is. I like hearing people's stories and their experience with something, but that's not strong evidence, right? I guess it's a type of evidence. It's called anecdotal testimonials, but there's so many confounds with that. We got to be very careful. I want to have good scientific evidence. And as Alex mentioned, with hydrogen, with it being safe, well, from, it's natural, the data suggests it's safe, and the preliminary evidence showing it has therapeutic effects, we call that the therapeutic index, right? The higher the therapeutic index is, basically this ratio of the potential benefits over the potential negative side effects, hydrogen has very low potential risk of side effects, a very high potential benefit, so that ratio is very optimal, very high therapeutic index, and that's really what makes me excited about this. I don't like these, I don't like the fear-mongering where people try to just talk so much about how mainstream pharma is all, the pharmocracy and corruption, and you can't trust the establishment, and every medical doctor is just in it for the money, and big pharma, blah, 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 on and on. And then they say, but I have something for you, and they offer you the product. It's not a good approach. It's not so black and white, and I think it's disingenuous. In fact, it's borderline dishonest. For example, if hydrogen gas really is shown to work, it'll be approved by the FDA, and it'll be used in hospital settings. Eventually, right?
It might take
Yeah, or longer. And for some people, maybe for your algorithm, you want to wait for a couple decades before you ever try hydrogen.
That is your prerogative.
Yeah, it's your choice, right?
Absolutely.
But you can't push that on somebody else, such as maybe Alex or myself, who I want to try it. I looked at the preliminary data that we did in the laboratory, and I'm like, I want to try this. And that's why I had that tank of gas. Now, I want to say, please don't do that. That's not a good idea. It's very dangerous. It's very explosive. The high pressure, this was very controlled, and it's not, you need to be really careful. In fact, there was a story, there's an individual who had cancer in China who heard all this marketing from companies selling hydrogen products, and he's like, oh, he went and got himself a tank of hydrogen gas, trying to cure himself, and then people didn't hear from him for a number of days, and he was found dead in his bathtub with a tank of hydrogen gas. And that really, really hurt the research. People were wondering, did the hydrogen gas do this? What happened? Like all these things. That's not okay. But what's also not okay is to not allow the public to have access to something like hydrogen when the preliminary evidence appears safe and potentially effective. So this individual was like, well, I'll just go out and do my own thing. For those individuals, if you really want something, then okay, you can try this machine, but please don't do it under the false pretense that we know it's going to cure everything and it's going to help you completely. It's not for you. I don't want that liability. I don't want that on my conscience. I don't want an email from somebody saying, I trusted you and I believe this was going to help so-and-so with their cancer and it didn't work and they passed away. I want a refund. Don't do that to me. That's not what we're not selling it to you. Okay, this is very important for me to maintain my academic integrity and my value to the truth. Please don't buy this machine. We only want this for people who are interested in the truth, who want to try this, who are curious, who have the financial means, and so on. So that's my TED Talk for today.
I want to add a couple of things. There's a couple of points I want to expand on here. When you mentioned don't do what you did with the tank, don't do a lot of the things I did when I was inventing various devices. You may remember this story. With the hydrogen tablets, we also have the hydrogen bath tablets that we use. And I was building a device. This was a makeshift that I built in my house to try and have a time release of the gas into the water to keep a stable concentration throughout the entire bath. And as I was scaling it up and doing the math on the pressure, I made a mistake in my calculation. And I was taking a bath, I was in the bath, and I realized it was about to explode. And my cat was on the ledge of the bath, and I had to like scramble, like I was in a grappling scramble and grab my cat and dive out of the bathroom. And then it detonated. Don't do what I did. It was very stupid, right? And I should have had someone else check my math. But we learn these things, and when experts can make mistakes like this is why we check each other's work and don't get sloppy. Do not do this stuff at home, please. A second point, I often repeat the mantra that in therapeutics, we need to ensure that something is safe and effective. Those are the two questions we need to say yes to. However, I believe it is a little bit more nuanced than this. We absolutely have to say yes to safe. It has to be safe. On the second point, it has to be potentially effective. And then people need this informed consent to understand the level of evidence that exists, the cost, the subjective cost relative to their wealth that it impacts. Because someone in poverty, maybe $1 is a lot of money for them, but someone who's a billionaire, maybe $5,000 is nothing to them. Right? These are our lessons we've been taught in theology. These are lessons that are logical, that we understand. We need this informed consent to understand what the level of evidence is, the level of safety is, the probability that it may help you, and what you are departing with and what that relative worth in what you're giving up for this. And this is what we want to give to people. Because again, for myself, for Dr. LeBaron, this is a good buy for us as an individual. It may not be for you, right? And this is the question, right? And we are trying to get this evidence better. We're always expanding it, but it may not be there yet for you. Now, on the last note, I believe everyone, we haven't fully answered it yet. My thoughts on protocol. Like what I say with the hydrogen tablets, because I tell people with the hydrogen tablets, everyone has a different threshold where you stop noticing results. Pay attention to yourself. I don't want people to spend more money than they have to. I advise people to start with 1 a day on an empty stomach, the largest amount of water you can chug down quick, give the instructions, room temperature water as soon as it rises to the surface, guzzle it fast. That is to save people money. Now, to save your time, which I believe time is a more valuable resource than money if you know how to utilize your time, I would suggest starting at that 20 to 30 minutes a day, maybe at the 2%. Listen to your body, try and be in tune with it, use your wearables, see what's going on. And I suggest to people to slowly scale up the amount of time and concentration you're using on the hydrogen machine to see if you notice any additional benefits. And that way you can properly find the peak of where you do not notice further benefit is helping you. I know with the tablets, a lot of people find a difference at one a day. That's great. We have research at one a day. For myself, I have osteoarthritis in 11 joints. I am a walking wreck. My body is completely broken for a number of reasons, a lifetime of contact and combat sports, a virus that caused an autoimmune response. I'm a mess. I need 4 to 6 tablets a day so that I don't have to take painkillers and anti-inflammatories. I've noticed going above that doesn't help me anymore, and I kind of settle in and listen to my body. Don't take more than you have to, and I'd recommend don't spend more time on this than you have to. It may not incur more benefit.
Yeah, that's great. That's probably a good idea. Try that. And of course, everything's kind of subjective. There's so many the placebo effect, and are you noticing things? And there's the Hawthorne effect. There's like all these variables. Again, part of the reason for the app we're trying to develop is to find trends and see how long they last. A lot of times in the clinical studies, we just start somebody directly on the 2%, and they go for the full hour sessions or whatever. So we just have to start, right? We don't have the ability to kind of ramp things up and all this stuff in the research, but we need to gather that data. I'm a little different than Alex. I feel very healthy. I don't have any problems anywhere. I still compete at a decent level in a number of things, as those who know me. And yeah, I'll just jump on the 4% and hit that thing for a few hours, and I don't notice any difference ever. So there it is. But why do I do it? I've been doing the research on this, and I'm like, dang, this looks pretty good. I like this. If it helps improving my mitochondria and improving how my body is, then I'm going to try it, and it seems safe. So I'm a little bit different than I try it because I see the data and I feel like it's safe and it makes sense to me, and I want to try it. But I don't notice big differences. But again, I've been at this for 16 years. Maybe I have too much hydrogen in me already.
And to be fair, I don't actually notice a difference until I stop.
I've heard that from a lot of people before. Yeah.
And one thing that I say with hydrogen water, I believe it's hydrogen inhalation. We know that if you do the same exercise every day for years, it ceases to be a stress. It just maybe becomes a chronic stress. You're no longer adapting from it. I tend to recommend people change their protocol every 6 months or so to maybe not habituate to hydrogen therapy. We don't have data on that yet. That's just a hypothesis of mine. So about once every 6 months, I'll take a week, maybe even 2, and I'll wash out. I let all my joints stiffen. I let myself fall into fatigue and be in pain and a wreck. And then I hit it again. And I actually, day to day, I always think, is this stuff even working? Because I don't feel anything. But every 6 months when I do that washout, I feel my pain return. And then I'm reminded, okay, maybe it is doing something. But again, that's anecdotal. That's me. And maybe because it's happened so many times, I expect it to happen and that placebo effect happens. But again, this is why we need more data. It's why we need more research. And we need, if you do want to try this, you understand everything about it, you understand the limitations in the data, it's a good financial trade-off for you. We want your data also. This is why we're developing the app.
Absolutely. And one of the things is, remember, a lot of the things that might be changing, even inside my own body, are not just the subjective markers of how's my energy, how's my sleep, how are my aches and pains. But when we do a lot of these studies, we see objective data changing, right? Maybe improvements in glucose regulation, in inflammatory response, in their actual other biomarkers, cholesterol, let's say, your blood pressure, phenotypically, your how much their weight loss.
They're repeatable.
Yeah.
We see the same things in study after study. And again, when I mention that myself and Dr. LeBaron have access to data that the world might not see, sometimes for 2 to 3 years, with the time it takes to write a proper manuscript and get it published in a decent journal, high impact factor journal. Have you been sitting on this data on the publication you did for 6 or 7 years?
Well, we actually knew the target for 10 years, but we needed to really hone in on a couple of things. But my point is, just because you don't notice something immediately doesn't mean it's not doing anything for you. And just because you notice something doesn't mean it's actually good for you, because it could have just been, how you slept better that day, so you feel better, right? There's a lot of things with this, but we want to collect all that data because these trends will help us guide more clinical research.
And we are going down the right avenue. Again, it might be some time, it might be a year, it might be 2 years. I know Dr. LeBaron's familiar, he's read this paper, but myself and some other professors and a team I'm working with have just finished our first draft of the manuscript, where we have identified responders and non-responders. Now, this is something we have seen in the data for many years, is that some individuals seem to respond very strongly to hydrogen, others not at all. And we had some hypotheses on why this is, and our first study has panned out. We have a much larger study that we're starting with rodent controls, looking at exact targets again, and this is regarding metabolic health. But this research is expanding. We are learning more, and we do know things that, if they end up being correct and published through peer review, are several years ahead of.
And I'll just add that there are, in some scenarios, some responders and non-responders, but that's looking at a specific area. Then that same individual who is a non-responder in this area might actually be a responder in a different area. So just because you don't see improvements in, say, these markers, there could be improvements in other markers. So there's a lot actually that's going on with this.
So we've tied, say, for instance, improvements in neurological function. You might respond better if you have a certain allele, like ApoE4. However, that might not be relevant at all on if it affects your metabolic health.
Yeah. So again, we want to say thank you for trusting us. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Thank you for understanding where we're coming from. We just want to provide you with the informed consent. And I hope we can get more data, more research to answer your questions, our questions, and together we can advance the research of molecular hydrogen.
And if you are a skeptical researcher, contact me. Hold me to what I said. I do donate, no questions asked. We have this set up on the machine. Same thing with the hydrogen water tablets. We have a well-controlled placebo. You own the data. I donate. I donate product, placebo, funds to help support it, put you in touch with various professors around the world to help collaborate with. And you publish it, whether it works or it doesn't, because I want to know.
Yeah, the only caveat I would just suggest, we could design a study that we know will not work. Like if you did a study and like, well, some people said that if you drink hydrogen water or hydrogen inhalation, you're going to be a foot taller. And then you publish the data, hydrogen is a scam. It doesn't make you taller.
That is a good point. I tell teams this all the time, that's not going to work. Yeah. And I'll tell them why. So I do only donate to teams that have a plausible hypothesis.
And we talk about it. It's very nice. Anyway, again, thank you.
Yeah.